Hey everyone, welcome to the show where we discuss current legal events and legal hot topics from the perspective of a seasoned attorney such as myself. Now today we're going to be discussing the issue of separation of church and state and whether our government is legally required to separate church and state. The reason we're talking about this today is because I've seen a lot about this in the media recently, and I've honestly seen individuals who are members of our legislature making comments about church and state and whether it's in the Constitution and whether it's not in the Constitution. So we'll get right to the point. In case you're wondering, our United States Constitution does mandate and require a separation between church and state. And that mandate is found in the First Amendment to our United States Constitution. It is in the first sentence of the First Amendment. So the First Amendment, as it relates to freedom of religion, the First Amendment of our Constitution states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so that sentence is typically broken into two components. Lawyers refer to these components as clauses. The first part of this sentence is what we refer to as the Establishment Clause, and the second part of that sentence is what we call the Free Exercise Clause. So the Establishment Clause states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Okay, so that's why it's called the Establishment Clause, because it says that Congress, which is synonymous with government, cannot establish any particular religion that will be upheld and determined to be the official religion of this country. So when you say it like that, well, what does that mean? It means that there is a separation between church and state, even if the word church, the word state, and the word separation don't appear in that sentence. And so sometimes when people say, oh, well, that's not in the Constitution, sometimes they say that in a manner that is what we lawyers refer to as disingenuous, because even though the statement is actually true, those three words do not appear in the Constitution. The legal concept does indeed appear in our Constitution and is a bedrock principle that our country is built on. The next question is, well, why? And honestly, that question can be answered by the second part of the sentence, which is the Free Exercise Clause. So the Free Exercise Clause says that Congress cannot prohibit the free exercise of religion. If we think about this, in a country with multiple religions, how is it that we can make a statement and ensure that we abide by the statement? Well, the only way that we can honestly comply with that statement is to prohibit the government from establishing one religion over another. So you see, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause go hand in hand. And the purpose of these two clauses is to ensure religious freedom for all, not just for some, but for all. One of the disturbing themes that we see in our legal climate, as well as in some of our legislative bodies, is a disdain for the separation of church and state, or statements alluding to a unfortunately mistaken belief that the separation of church and state is not required, or that it doesn't exist. And a lot of times when you see this mentioned, ironically enough, it'll typically be mentioned in the context of religious freedom. If you look at these statements closely, those statements tend to lean towards establishing a certain religion. Those statements tend to be propagated by individuals who are part of a certain religion. And therefore, unfortunately and disturbingly enough, looks like there are individuals that think maybe one particular religion should be established over others. Regardless of what religion you are, and even if you are part of the religion that some people seek to, unfortunately, and is becoming more and more apparent, seek to and would maybe like to establish in this country, that is problematic. And it is one of the reasons why we hear a lot of people saying that, hey, democracy is at risk. And so people say things like that because when you see a system that people are trying to create a system that could create oppression, such as establishing one religion over another, that will in and of itself create oppression, because some people are not going to be able to freely exercise their religion, and they're going to have another religion being forced upon them that they don't believe in. And so that's going to stifle religious freedom for everyone except for the religion that may have been established. And that is 100% contrary to the core concept of democracy, because a democracy, the core principle of democracy is freedom, and not just freedom for some, but freedom for all. And so this issue honestly is particularly important at this moment because we are coming into midterm elections, something that maybe people don't necessarily think about on a regular basis, but probably we should more and more, honestly, is that the people that we elect, those people actually write the laws that we have to comply with. So just a quick primer on how the legal system works overall. The legislature, which is Congress, and then the different state legislatures. So Congress is the federal government's legislature, and then you have each individual state has their own state legislature. And so those legislators collectively, they write the laws that we have to follow, the laws that are used to govern this country and govern this democracy. If we vote in people who don't either believe in our democracy or don't believe in all the freedoms that are set out in our Constitution, then we are putting ourselves at risk. At that point, we're working against ourselves, because who knows which side it'll play out on. If you are of a certain religion and you vote for people who think that a certain religion will be established, well, maybe that religion may end up being established. But who's to say that one day those people don't get voted out, someone else gets voted in, and now all of a sudden there's another religion that is established, and it just keeps replaying and repeating, and it's just it will create just a perpetual system of oppression. And that, I do believe, is the reason why our founding fathers had the foresight to say we don't need to establish any religion. Not to mention the fact that if we know a little bit about history, and I won't get into this very in depth, but history shows that one of the reasons why there is a separation of church and state in this country is because some of the founding fathers who actually came to this country were actually oppressed from a religious standpoint. We don't have to be doomed to make mistakes that have already been made and already been rectified in our Constitution. So we have to be very mindful about that, even though we might think, oh, everyone needs to do this and everyone should believe this, and we all have the right to our own autonomous beliefs. And personal autonomy is another issue that comes up in relation to freedom. And personal autonomy just means the right to be who you want to be. Obviously, as long as you're not trying to be a criminal. Okay, because you don't have the right to be a criminal. People go to jail for that. But you do have the right to be you. Just because we have freedom of religion, or we have freedom, there's other freedoms that are in the Constitution. For example, freedom of the press. Our freedoms have boundaries, and those boundaries are necessary to protect the freedoms for everyone, so that no one person or no one particular group's freedoms override any other person's. I think sometimes in this day and age, in this particular legal climate, lose sight of. That's just food for thought for us to keep that at the forefront of our minds when we make decisions about how we want to move forward. Because sometimes I think we make decisions and we don't realize the legal impact that they will have. But in this particular legal climate, we have to be very mindful, because in this legal climate, there are laws that are being passed that don't even meet the requirements of actually being called a law, except for a particular legislature wrote it on a piece of paper, they called it a law, they rubber stamped it as a law, and so now it's a law. But if you really look at the legal concepts the concepts that are in that law, they don't meet any of the foundational principles of being a law, and they violate a lot of constitutional principles and honestly rights of everyday people. So we have to be extremely mindful of that. It is imperative that we maintain our democracy. And because of that, my next episode, we're going to be discussing different types of governments and also different types of economies that typically go with certain types of governments. So if you thought this was interesting, and I hope you did, then go ahead and stay tuned, and I'll see you on my next show where we discuss different types of governments, and it'll include democracies, socialist governments, and communist governments, and it'll also discuss what authoritarianism is, because we probably, if we read the news, we probably hear a lot about that, and that is something that we want to be mindful about as well. If you found this to be interesting, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in our next episode.